Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Angel Face Magic Hour. Today, we are here with another guest. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking with Trieste today, otherwise known as the Inner You on TikTok. And I'm really excited. I asked you to do this a while ago, and then we're finally getting to it. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you. But I just love to have you introduce yourself to our audience, share a little bit about where you are and where you're, a little bit about your work.
Yeah. Hi there. So my name's Trieste, otherwise known as the Inner You. I'm on TikTok. I've been pretty active on there for a little over a year. I like to share, funny, silly TikTok videos, but also a lot of stuff about human design, astrology, personal growth, emotional healing. I also do have a consulting business, Opal Insights. And I offer services in sort of a different way than a lot of readers and energy workers and that sort of thing, where I combine a lot of different modalities into my sessions. So it just kind of depends on what an individual is needing, even more mundane things like I'm really good at resource gathering. So if somebody is facing some sort of crisis in their life and they need to know, for example, what sort of options are available to help them in their local city, I'm pretty good at finding information like that and helping connecting them to different resources, but then also combining in astrology and human design and oracle cards and all that, so that there can be a lot of different options available to help people where they're at. But really my biggest focus, I do all that, but also my biggest focus really is education. So really working on helping people learn how to understand these different modalities themselves so that they don't necessarily have to go to a reader. They can actually learn how to do these things for themselves. And I feel personally like that gives a deeper understanding to things like human design, to actually be able to understand why things are the way they are and all of that.
Yeah, amazing. I feel the same way. I think that the more that we can help people understand how to use the tools, like a reading is amazing. And that's what I do. So I want people to get readings.
Yeah.
But I think the more that we can understand the tool, it's like we can continue to access it. So it's not like you're going to get a little piece of spiritual information and you're good forever. It's like you're always constantly evolving. So
True.
being able to show people how they can use that in their mundane daily life, I think is very helpful.
Yeah. I was actually thinking of this subject the other day, like giving readings versus teaching people how to access the information themselves. And I definitely agree that there are certain situations where definitely it's important to be able to have a reader to go to. I personally don't like dedicating the bulk of my time with clients to giving actual readings. I prefer to work with people to actually teach them how to do things, but more so that's just my personal thing because honestly, for me, it's kind of exhausting to give readings professionally. Like it's a lot, it takes a lot, but I think that it's really important for there to be people that are available to give those readings, because sometimes people may not really want to go that deeply into things, and that's okay. They may have an emergency where they need help right then and there. They don't have time to learn a whole system. So that's why I do offer readings in my work that I do. But while I'm giving a reading or while I'm talking to someone about something, I'll be interspersing education. So for example, if someone is having a certain crisis, and they are open to human design and astrology, we're going to be talking about that crisis. I'm going to be helping them on an intuitive level, but I'm also going to be talking about like, hey, these are these human design elements that may help you get through this, or, like stuff like that.
Amazing. Yeah. And are you doing these on like Zoom, like on the phone, or in person?
Yeah, Zoom right now, maybe in person at some point. But I like online. It's a lot easier, and there are a lot of people, that have concerns about the pandemic and stuff still. So that kind of helps eliminate that. And less overhead.
Yeah, that's true, definitely. And like, you're able to help people in other areas than just where you
Mm-hmm.
are.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Well, I'm
Yeah.
excited. I wanted to kind of have you on to talk a little bit about human design because, so first of all, I would love you to just explain what is human design.
Sure.
But I think it's a really interesting subject. So if people are unfamiliar with it, we're gonna kind of talk a little bit about what that is. But you utilize human design and astrology as well as your intuitive skills and
Mm-hmm.
cards.
Yeah.
So you kind of mix everything together. And I had you pull up my chart, so you
Mhm.
kind of use my chart to kind of explore, and hopefully we can give people some examples on how, if they're interested in like learning the beginnings of human design, how they
Mhm.
could approach looking at a chart. But I
Mhm.
also love to just talk about your intuitive work and everything else. So we'll kind of just see where the conversation takes us. But I
Yeah.
think a good place to start would just be explaining to people what is human design.
Sure, sure. Yeah. And I don't I was thinking of this the other day because human design was brought to the world essentially through this guy, Ra Uruhu. I don't even know if I'm saying his name right. Um, but Ra, I just call him Ra. Um, he had like this mystical experience where the system was basically shown to him over a period of time. And but when you look at human design, it essentially is a combination of astrology, the I Ching, and like yoga and some Hindu, like Vedic sort of influences, like the chakra system or chakra system. I have a hard time pronouncing it. But like the different energy centers, that you find in yoga and such, like the throat chakra, that sort of thing. The various centers on the human design chart are very much linked in with the traditional chakra systems.
Oh, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So it's basically a combination of those three, but ultimately human design was a revealed system. It wasn't something that like he went and studied all these different systems and combined them. He had a mystical experience where there were these like little crystal things flying around, and like I think one flew into him, and then boom, he just had this wild experience where he just had all this knowledge and awareness, um and brought it forward and started teaching it. So it's
So like a channeled kind of thing.
yeah, like a channeled sort of thing. Yeah, like a revealed sort of thing. And the Raw, as well as other people in the human design world, various teachers and such, it's definitely not considered a religion or anything like that. It's, more along the lines of being called a system or a modality, just like astrology or numerology. So it's definitely on that same level as like astrology or numerology, but it's really a synthesis of a lot of different systems. But one thing I also always like to say, and people within human design say this as well, Ra definitely said this a lot, is that it's not necessarily a one size fits all. So even though human design could potentially help anyone, not everyone is going to be led to it. Not everyone's going to benefit from it because not everyone's going to be open to that sort of system. Some people would work better with a different system.
Yeah, and I was saying to you before we started this, like I am interested in astrology, but personally when I started hearing about human design, the descriptions of it resonated a lot more with me. It was easier for me to pick up on, oh, that feels like true to me, than
Mm-hmm.
astrology. And I think the only main reason with that is because astrology is so complex, and human design is too. That's why you're here, to explain it to us a little bit.
Yeah.
But there are less design types than there
Mm.
are signs in
Mm.
astrology. So I feel like for me it was easier to begin digesting that information because there was a little bit
Interesting.
less numbers. I don't know.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I could see how that could be. I've always kind of thought of human design as being, uh, I don't know if I would say it's more complex than astrology, but I feel like it's more specific. I feel like astrology has the potential to be as specific as human design, but I feel like it's almost like astrology is this huge universe that's super spread out. And like, yes, you could potentially travel to every star and galaxy and learn about each one, but it could take lifetimes. Whereas human design to me kind of, in a sense, condenses all this vast information down into more easily accessible bites. Ra always said that human design was like simple but complex, I think, or complex but simple. I may get it switched, but it's
No,
like
that
that.
makes sense to me.
Yeah, it really is like that. And that was a big part for me too. I had been studying astrology since about 2012. And then it was in 2015 or 16 that I was introduced to human design. Um, where were you? How did you first come across it? I was curious.
Um, that's a good question. Honestly, I think from like a podcast or something.
Oh.
I heard about it. I think it was on a podcast.
Mhm.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, it was on this podcast. I don't think it's a podcast anymore, but at the time it was like really popular in the wellnessy kind of space. Like That's So Retrograde. I don't know if you ever listened to it. But it was fun. It was like these two comedian girls and they would talk about wellness and then they have guests on. And they had this one person, I think her name's Ashley something, and she did human design readings and it was really interesting to me. And then like a week later, I had a client come in because I also do facials. I don't know if you know that, but I also do
Yeah.
skincare. So I had this client come in and I was doing her facial and then she was talking to me about her new business she started and she just started to do human design readings. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I literally just heard about this. So she like sent me an email about my chart, but it was very basic. It was just like, you're a projector. It wasn't like super detailed. And then I think in 2020, I got a reading from this other person. And it was interesting, but it was like they gave me so much information that it was almost overwhelming. So I have like a whole packet of like emailed information they sent me, like this is your authority and your lines and all this. They talked to me about like food, like how you eat food and digestion and stuff. And it was very interesting, but it was like just the formatting wasn't the best for me. For me, it's easier to digest information someone telling me.
Yeah.
That's why I love TikTok because I love videos than like the writing. But I could go back and have that. So I think for some people that's really helpful.
Yeah.
To have it in that format.
It's interesting that you bring that up because when I had thought about going through the official human design school and get certified, because human design, like the Jovian Institute or Jovian Archive, whatever it's called, is like the official human design organization, and they have a program where you can become a certified human design reader and that sort of thing. And I really didn't feel led to go that route. So I always do let people know like that, yeah, and I'm not certified and I don't really want to be, because the mainstream human design is kind of regimented in a sense, and pretty much any reader, like you probably got what's called a foundation reading, which is very in depth, but for the average person that doesn't really know a whole lot about human design, it's really, to me, very overwhelming and
I was like, I know, I kind of was a dry
gobbledygook.
kitchens. I don't know what that means, but
Yeah.
I know that that's me.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah,
it was a little overwhelming. And then, I see so many people on Instagram posting like little infographics, like projector line, like this is your thing that's happening to you right now, like kind of like applying the information to what's going on collectively.
Mhm.
And those are interesting, but I never understand.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm not in depth in the knowledge enough to get what they're trying to tell
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Have you seen those? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I've been trying to working on, at least when I had my series of human design, which
Oh, you
you know,
cut out for a second, I think.
oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just saying that that's sort of what I was working on with my human design series on TikTok, was to make things a little bit more accessible and more bite-sized, because it is really overwhelming to try to figure out, what does this chart mean? What does this all mean? Even uh, there's so much information out there for
Yeah.
sure. But I know you were asking earlier, like how I got started with human design.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
Yeah, I had been studying astrology since about 2012. And little by little, I was kind of learning it by osmosis, because it was so overwhelming. And I would just do people's charts, and I would kind of learn that way. Just by doing people's charts, I would learn different things. And I was living up in Denver at the time and met a girl, and we went out, and she asked me randomly, "Have you ever heard of human design?" And I said, "No, I've never heard of it." And she said, "Well, it's like astrology on crack." And I said, "Sign me up. This sounds fascinating." And she was actually kind of negative towards it. And for the reason that I've seen a lot of people, when people latch on to the different type names, like manifestor, projector, and they assign like their layman English meaning to it, and they'll be like, "Well, why aren't I a manifestor? I want to be a manifestor. That's the best." And and then they don't realize, well, that doesn't mean what you think it means. It's not really like what we say when we're talking about manifesting. That's not exactly the same in human design.
Yeah.
So she was kind of off put by the titles, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm not really into it, but you could check it out. Maybe you'd like it." And I loved it. It just blew my mind. I had been dealing with a lot of health problems, and I actually had been on disability for a few years at that time, because I was burnt out. I experienced projector burnout, but before, I had no idea what a projector was or what projector burnout was. But it really helped me. It helped me physically heal, mentally, emotionally. It helped me really break through a lot of things that I've been working on and not understanding, like, why am I like this? Why do I struggle with this? Things that didn't make sense suddenly made sense once I started experimenting and studying human design.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you do a reading for someone, like you would pull up their human design and their astrology chart,
It really
or it
depends.
just depends on what they need or what they're looking for.
Yeah, so usually I will always look at both. So if and it tends to be more like that people usually have something going on in their life. Like, for example, they might be struggling with school, trying to find a new job. So kind of depending on why they are having a hard time, or like what it is, like where is the guidance? What sort of guidance are they looking for? What are they trying to change in their life? Because, usually if someone is getting involved in something or looking for something, there's something going on that kind of spurs them. It might just be like emotional healing. That's a big thing that that's like my primary focus, is helping people heal various trauma wounds, emotional wounds, helping them get in touch with who they really are, so that they can really live the life that they want. And utilizing things like human design and astrology. So it just kind of depends. And also, if the person is more interested in one thing or another, then I definitely can focus in on one thing more than another. Like, some people don't want to use oracle cards. Some people aren't into astrology. And, it's just kind of flexible that way, so that we
Yeah.
can use different things depending. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the human design, it's
Yeah.
like basically the same as astrology, you would use people's birth chart information, like the time they were born,
Mhm.
to pull
Yeah,
up
just
the information.
exactly. The same sort of birth data is needed, time of birth, place, um, and date.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like as an intuitive person, do you feel like um when you are like just like connecting with someone, do you feel like oftentimes once you pull up the chart, it will give you kind of like confirmation on some of the like messages that maybe you were picking up on?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I think it has to do both with intuition and then also uh becoming like the more that I study astrology and human design, the more I feel like I'm spotting certain elements within people and recognizing, oh, I bet they're a projector or they seem like a manifester. Just sort of the same way that someone might say, oh, that person seems like they're a Scorpio or they look like a Pisces sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I bet you like too, like just years looking at these charts, like both the
Mhm.
human design and the astrology, like being able to recognize some patterns and stuff between like different age groups and things
Mm.
like that. Have you noticed anything like that?
Not
Like
offhand.
emotional
That's
stuff?
well, the most of the people that I work with tend to be my age or younger, although sometimes I do work with people that are a little bit older than me, like in my parents' age range, So I'm 45, and then I have kids that are 20 and 21. So a lot of times I work with, like, I help, my girls with things they might be going through. And then they have friends that I do readings for as well. And a lot of the different people tend to be 20s to 30s to 40s, pretty much. But when things are going on in the world, um, I definitely am sometimes looking at different generational things. One thing I've been getting into a lot lately is Chiron and the
Mhm.
different sort of elements that can really show up depending on a person's Chiron placement. But I haven't really looked to see where that overlap shows up in human design. That would be really interesting to look into as far
I'm
as
just
some of
curious.
those things. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I
Yeah, I'm just curious
definitely.
if like certain age groups, like
Uh-huh.
at least with astrology, I know we have like our outer planets that are more like our generational
Mm-hmm.
connections. Like for me, I'm 32, so a lot of people are like their Pluto's in Scorpio, but like the younger people I think are Aquarius. So
Yeah.
then that's kind of like these generational shifts. So I'm
Yeah.
curious if like
They do
there's
have.
a certain more amount of reflectors in a different generation or things like
Yeah.
that. I'm just
Well, I don't believe that there's a different percentage of like projectors versus, I think it's pretty much across the board pretty average, but I could be wrong. I don't know that for certain. But one thing there is the incarnation cross, and that tends to be more generational. So the incarnation cross, as far as, or at least certain time periods that, like you have the vessel of love too. And I honestly am not a expert when it comes to the generational
yeah, I was just
incarnation
curious.
crosses. But yeah, it's
And there's
not.
so much to look at it too. Like,
Yes.
there's so many different things that we can explore.
Yeah, I tend to focus a lot more on, well, definitely when people are new to human design. We were talking about kind of like breaking things down into bite-sized pieces. So
Yes.
the first thing, if someone's interested in human design, the very first thing they'd really want to focus in on, and this is not just coming from me, but this is something Rob would teach and a lot of people within human design, is the first number one thing is to really get comfortable with your strategy and your authority. So, as a projector, the strategy is to wait for the invitation. And that's really more so for big issues. So you've probably heard of that, wait for the invitation.
Yeah, I have. And I feel like I feel like it can be somewhat misconstrued,
Mhm.
like in my mind or in the collective of like, that means that you don't have to do anything until someone asks you
Exactly.
to.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely. And a lot of people get really upset and think, does that mean that like I can't do anything? Like I have none of my own free will and I'm just a puppet waiting to be asked to do something? And that's not at all what it is. All of the different aspects of strategy, no matter if you're a projector, a manifester, it doesn't matter, but strategy ultimately comes down to how you make big decisions. So it's not always going to be about just regular everyday life. It's definitely going to be your big decisions, and it can be about everyday life. For example, trying to figure out if you want to maybe, I don't know, like go on a date with someone. That can seem like a small thing, but it could have really far reaching, consequences or benefits. So but it's really more so geared towards big things. So we talk about it impacting things like marriage, starting or ending relationships, starting or ending a business, changing jobs, looking like trying to get a promotion, going back to college, going to college in the first place, um, stuff like that, really
Yeah.
moving. That's another big one, moving. So that's a lot of what it's all about. So a projector definitely can, for example, a projector can start a business without anyone inviting them to. But when it comes to um, like trying to drum up business for that business, it can change a little bit, So a lot of times, depending on a person's authority, that's going to come into play. And I can talk about that in a moment. But a lot of times with projectors, I'm a projector too, we're kind of guided or advised to, how can I put this, do our own thing and just basically do what you feel led to do. And a lot of times that's where your authority comes in and kind of helps guide you on what you want to do and what's right for you to do. And then as you're doing that, those opportunities come in. So for a projector specifically, those opportunities, invitations would arise. And so someone might ask you to do this or see if you want to do this or say, hey, can anyone do this?
I mean,
Different
that's
things like
that's how
that.
this podcast happened. You're just showing up
Exactly.
on TikTok and I'm like, hey, I like this person. Want to come on my podcast?
Exactly. That's a very perfect example. Yeah. I wasn't like seeking out like, hey, I want to be on a podcast. I was just doing my thing, making TikToks, talking about human design. So that's a
Yeah.
really good example. Yeah.
So so just to break it down for people a little more, so there are how many there's 4 design types that you can be?
Technically, officially, there are 4, but most people tend to think of there being 5 because they add manifesting generators.
Okay. So
Yeah.
do you want to just share what those are for us?
Yeah, sure.
What the names are?
Yeah. Do you want just the names or also to briefly talk about the strategy?
Yeah, maybe just share the 4 or the 5 types,
Mhm.
and then just like a brief kind of explanation of like the authority, what that means for
Mhm.
people.
Sure, sure.
And yeah, so I am a projector, and so are you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I'll start with reflectors. They're the most rare reflectors. I don't even think I've ever met a reflector in person. That's how rare they are. Um, so a reflector, their authority, or I should say, I'm sorry, their strategy is to wait a full moon cycle before making any big decisions. So
Wow.
about 28 days, they need to wait 28 days. Um, and during that time, their strategy is that they're going to be kind of talking it over and thinking about what they think. And, they do all these different things to come to that conclusion after 28 days of what's right for them, because basically they have to go through all of the different phases of the moon and feel how they feel about that opportunity. So on one day they might feel great about it, and then 2 days later the moon changes, signs, or changes its placement, and they feel differently, and then so they really have to go through those ups and downs of the full month before they can really have that clarity of what's the right decision for them. And
Wow.
then, yeah,
It's a
it's
long
really
time.
cool. Oh, I know. Can you imagine? Like, I
cannot.
can't imagine. A lot of times people don't want to be the type they are. They say, "Ah, that's boring. I want to be this or that." But every type has its challenges and its blessings. Every type really does have really fantastic parts and parts that sometimes are a little hard, because that's just life. None of us have it 100% easy.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So then projectors, like you and I, projectors are supposed to wait for the invitation. And so basically just do their own thing, do what they feel led to do, and live their life, and then wait for invitations to come through. One thing I've discovered as a projector over the years is that invitations are not always verbal. Sometimes they're energetic. So one big thing I've noticed a lot is that I can go to a place and I can energetically feel the invitation or no invitation. And so that's something that's not really always talked about in mainstream human design, but it is not always verbal. Sometimes it's more of an energetic thing. And so when we can develop that sort of perception of the more subtle, nuanced sorts of ways that we're invited, it's not always a literal invitation. But a lot of times it is, in one way or another. And then generators and manifesting generators, their authority, yes, no, strategy. I have an open head in Ajna, so I get confused about exact things really easily. So I'm not ashamed to say it. I don't know anything. There's nothing in my head. The strategy. The strategy for generators and manifesting generators is to respond. And that could be responding to life, responding to words, things they see, music, things they hear. Generators and manifesting generators basically are living their life and are literally every second responding to stimuli and everything around them. And so basically a lot of times they may not, like if they were just in a vacuum, they wouldn't be able to access their energy. They have to connect and basically engage with something outside of themselves and be able to respond to it, of like, ooh, that sounds interesting, or I want to do that. And that's what kind of helps them on their path. So yeah, basically manifestors, reflectors, generators, projectors. Is that all four? I think I said all four.
And the manifestors.
Oh, manifestors. We didn't do them
You
yet.
have the manifestors.
Yes.
But there's more. Is there more manifestors than there are the rest of them? Or which, I know one of them there's a larger percentage. Generators.
Yeah, most people are generators. Yeah, that's the most common.
So projectors more rare, and then I think the reflectors are the rarest.
Yes, reflectors are the rarest, and then I think I'm pretty sure manifestors are the second rarest, and then projectors. Okay. Yeah, because projectors are at about 22% of the population.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're definitely not nearly as common as generators. I don't know the generator percentage offhand. I want to say it's like 76 or 67%, something like that. It's pretty high. Majority of people, yeah.
I'd be curious to know, like, too, if there's like, I don't know why, but everyone that I've met that is a projector is also happens to be like a medium or a psychic. And I don't know if that's just because I am meeting a lot of people who are mediums and psychics.
No. Oh, no,
but
no,
I'm
no.
like,
It
I feel
is
like
a
there's a
projector
big
thing.
connection.
It is 100% a projector thing. Because a big part of what human design is talking about when we're talking about types is actually talking about aura types. And in human design, the aura is what kind of picks up information from the world, from other people. And so projectors are 1000% very psychic, especially if they're either communicating with someone one-on-one, but even more so if they're in the same space as someone. So like a projector can have that one-on-one intuition with someone just when they're talking directly to someone. But when they are in the same room as someone, then forget about it. Like they are psychic as fuck. And that's because the projector aura is like an arm. So it, and auras in the, I know different groups have different ideas about auras and how they are, but in human design, they talk about the aura basically extending a certain way around the body and having a certain shape. And so the shape of a projector's aura is like an arm coming out.
Oh, really?
Like
I
this.
didn't know
Yes.
that.
And so when you get close enough to someone, you're literally poking your aura into someone else and just accessing all of this information. So projectors are super duper empathetic, able to really read energy very easily, able to be very telepathic a lot of times. It's very interesting. And it can be good or bad, like.
I need to pull up my parents' charts now that I'm like thinking about this. I gotta pull my parents' charts. I'm curious
Yeah.
what they are.
Yeah, it's really
Do you know
interesting.
what your family is and stuff?
On my parents, I don't have, I think my mom is a manifesting generator, but I don't recall what my dad is or was. He passed. My daughters, though, I have one that's a manifesting generator and one's a manifester. Oh boy.
And you said they're in their 20s.
Yeah, they just turned 20 and 21 recently. Yeah,
So are
both.
they into all the kind of like
Yeah.
magical stuff?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I raised them from a very, I raised them my whole life, a single mom pretty much. And I always told them, you can believe whatever you want to believe. I was very open about that. I always was very open about what I believed and also my history, because at one time I was very Christian. And so, I was really open-minded with them. My manifestor daughter, when she was 5, she went to kindergarten and there was someone bullying her, and she said, you better watch out because I'm a real witch. And if you don't leave me alone, I am going to put a curse on you.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I never did stuff like that. Never talked about curses or hexes. I've never been into that aspect of witchcraft. Oh boy, but she just came up with that. Like,
That's so funny.
it's
I love
very
that.
funny. Yeah. Yeah. So manifestors, the type for manifestors, their strategy is to inform. So they just need to let people know what their plans are. So some people are kind of like, oh, they got the best deal of all because they can do whatever they want. They just have to tell people what they're going to do. But people don't realize that that is so hard for most manifestors, especially if they weren't raised understanding their human design, because most manifestors, that's the last thing they want to do. They're very independent, they're very headstrong, they're very unique. They are their ideas, what they come up with is really off the wall for most people. And so most people are like, whoa, what are you saying? And that's how it's supposed to be, because manifestors are really supposed to really rattle things up and change things. And if they said, hey, I want to do this, and everyone was like, oh, that's a great idea, that would almost be like, oh, yeah, it should be different and weird and crazy and out there, that's a
I'm
good
curious if
thing.
there's like, if like any historical, like Martin Luther King or like someone like that who made these big changes that weren't really
Ooh.
like viewed as positive at the time. I'm like
Oh,
curious if
yeah.
maybe they were manifestors or,
That
I think that
that's
could be
awesome.
interesting
Yeah,
to think
that
about.
would
But it's
very
hard to
cool.
get people's like, the 60s is one thing, but further back it would be harder to get people's like birth information.
True. And
But
then some signs, like I want to say projectors were a more recent development.
oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, and I don't know if it has to do with, I'm not a 100% sure on this, if it has to do with when certain planets were discovered, but
Mm.
or if it was something else. It's an aspect of human design I haven't really studied, is that different types were not around at certain times. And so I'm pretty sure it's projectors that are one of the newer, or the newer type, the newest type. I'm not 100% certain on that, but like the different types, they weren't always all here. So that's kind
Mm.
of different. Manifestors have been here for a long time, because manifestors are like considered, a lot of times historically were said to be like the rulers. They were the old school rulers in kind of how we did society in the past. And now that we're evolving into new ways, manifestors, that's not really their role anymore, but they still kind of want to do it. But now they have the opportunity to do it in different ways. They can be those trailblazers in different ways. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to make an empire and you're all going to listen to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe we'll pull up my chart and then we could
Sure.
kind of have you first, like kind of just explain visually, like if someone were to look at a chart, there's all these arrows, there's all these things, like what kind of just explaining to people what they're looking at. And then maybe we could talk about my chart,
Mhm.
and just some information about like the centers and all that.
Yeah,
Anything that
sounds good.
you think would be valuable for people.
Mhm.
Um, so you sent me an email, so I'm gonna do a little screen sharing and see if I can pull it up. Okay, here we go. Okay. So let's see, get all this out of here. My dance classes, my selfies. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then I see you. Okay, awesome.
Cool.
So what you guys are looking at is, and if you're on the audio podcast, you can watch this on YouTube and you'll see the video. But this is my birth or my human design chart. So what I gave you was my birth information, when I was born, where I was born, and then you pulled this up. So this
Mhm.
is this like a website or like an app that people
Yeah.
use?
So there's a couple different places you can get a free chart. I use this is from Genetic Matrix, and they definitely give a very in-depth one. Another really good one is mybodygraph.com. So those are the two that I usually use the most often, and they both have free and paid versions. But you can definitely get your chart like this just through the free version. So it's a
Cool.
good way to start out.
Yeah, I've done I did one that was just like myhumandesign.com or something like that.
Yeah.
But this one has more information than the one I use. So what we're
Okay.
it didn't have the lines, it just had the centers on it.
Oh, okay.
So what we're looking at is, and I'm kind of circling around here, is there's a little body and then there's all these different shapes on here and then there's all these different lines meeting up. So
Yeah.
basically this is a visual way for us to understand the chart. So I just
Mhm.
love to have you kind of like, and of course we know this is very complex and people
Mhm.
could study this forever. So
Yeah.
very
Just basic.
simply, like
Sure.
kind of just explain to people visually what they're looking at, like with these different centers, and then
Yeah.
maybe a
Yeah.
little bit about the lines, how we see some of them are not filled in, some of them
Exactly.
are,
Yeah.
um
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
there's all those numbers.
Yeah.
What the hell is all that? So maybe just
Exactly.
a kind of brief way for people to look at it, and if people
Uh-huh.
want to go on their own and pull up their chart so they can look at it at the same time. You guys can pause it,
Mhm.
do that, and you'll have the info. But otherwise, you can just follow along with my chart.
Yeah, for sure. And then one thing I wanted to mention is that anyone seeing this or listening that wants to understand their chart better, a lot of the information that I'm going to talk about, you can find the details for your specific chart online for free. And so once you kind of have a basic understanding about what you're actually looking at here, it's a lot easier for you to be able to look up like a particular channel, like for example, the 1333 channel, and then you actually know what to look for, and then you can read what that means and kind of explore your chart more in depth. So basically, to get started here, all of the different shapes here, the triangles, the squares that you're seeing here, those are called centers. And the very top one here is the head center. And then the one below that is called the ajna. And the one
So
below
that's like
that,
third eye kind of area.
yes, exactly. So the head is, I actually had a little cheat sheet here. Let me go over there because there's no way I could memorize all this
Oh
stuff.
yeah, no, we don't expect you to.
Oh, where did it go?
And there's all sorts of apps and stuff
Oh,
nowadays
yeah.
too. So it's like I would just encourage people to start the free stuff, maybe
Oh,
then get
yeah.
a reading, and then see if you want to explore the apps.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know.
So, just briefly, the head is dealing with inspiration sort of stuff coming in. That's the top triangle. And then the ajna is where we sort of conceptualize things. So you can think of the head as taking in information like the crown chakra, and then the ajna sort of making sense of what we're taking in. So they are linked. And the two together basically sort of comprise what we think of as the mind. But in human design, we separate out the ajna and the head. And then the
Do the
throat, yeah.
colors have any significance? Or are they the same for everyone? Like how it's kind of light green and then dark green?
Yeah, it just depends on the chart creator. So it's not
Oh, okay. So
really,
it's not like does it have a
yeah.
divinatory meaning or anything?
Yeah, not those outline colors at
Okay.
least. But the red and the black definitely have meaning that we can get to. And
Yeah.
so then the throat is that square there, and that's dealing with expression, communication, all that normal stuff that you expect with the throat. And then the square below it, that one that looks kind of like a diamond, that's the G center. Lately, a lot of people call it the identity center. So it's same thing, G center, identity center, they're called the same. That's kind of talking about who you are in this world and your path. A lot of times it's leading to like what you do. So it's who you are and what you do in this world, in this life. And
Is that
then
more like the heart space kind of, or like a little
uh
below it,
so
or not
it's
connected?
yeah, as far as what it connects to, whether it's like the heart chakra, it is in that same region. But this is where it is like sort of the chakra system that we're more familiar with more Hindu and East Indian sort of India uh, traditions and cultures, yoga, all that. But it's not exactly like that
Same,
type of shit.
but different.
Exactly, as far as where it is. It's similar though. Um, and then
And
the
then we
heart,
have this little thing.
yeah. So that's the heart center in human design,
Okay.
and that's dealing with your ego and your willpower, and also it can be linked with relationships and that sort of thing. And then the square that's there in the middle, yeah, right there, that's the sacral, and that's dealing with your life force energy and a lot of your energy for getting things done. Um, and then below
None of
that,
mine, I don't have anything. Mine are all empty.
well, but that's okay. That doesn't mean you don't have energy. It just means you don't always have energy.
That's true. So we have this one, and then below it's another
Yeah.
square. And for people that are listening, I'm showing you guys this on the video, what we're talking about. So if you're confused, go to the video.
So below that is the root, and that's dealing a lot with our sense of security and also the pressure of living, like the pressure to live, adrenal glands, that sort of thing. And then to the left of that is your spleen, and that's dealing with awareness and also immune system. That's a really big one. So people that have an undefined spleen, I used to date someone with that, and it really can manifest in interesting ways. You're probably, if not currently, in the past, but you probably really struggle with being a germaphobe sometimes, or maybe feeling very uncomfortable around people that are sick. It may not even, like, you may consciously, like, not like logically, you're like, yeah, I know that I'm safe and I'm not going to get sick, but you might just feel this weird feeling in your body, like this discomfort, like in your lower back, almost like where you just feel a little bit like skeevied out when you're around extreme illness, or like almost always afraid that you're going to somehow catch it or be impacted by it. Yeah, it's really interesting because the spleen center is the original sort of intuitive space of humans, at least from the human design perspective. So that fear was very much a like a very ancient thing, because if you were around someone that was sick, of course you need to be afraid of them. You don't want to get sick. So it's like there's a reason why you have that fear and that feeling. But yeah. And then
I feel like that makes sense to me. Like I'll be I'm very particular about, like, I have to wash my dishes and put them in a certain way. And then like if my sibling like I live with my sibling, and like if they do it, like I will clean it like again, like kind of stuff. Like I have to, and at work too, at the spa, like I like sanitize everything, and I'm very particular about that. And as a child, I definitely had a lot of fear around illness and sickness, and I had some weird stuff with my actual spleen.
Oh, interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah. And you see how you have no circles on any of the numbers there. That means that center is completely open. You don't have any of your gates defined there. So that basically, I could say briefly, because and then we can go to the other last little center there. But so what happens when you have no definition, and definition is when we have an area colored in. So, and that area,
does that mean like how the circle, like how these numbers are colored in, or more like the lines that are connected to it? Both. Okay.
Yep, it could be either or, because if you look at where the numbers are colored in, they are when the number is colored in, the line is also colored in.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, because what the lines are called is channels, and so for each channel you have a gate, which is the numbers on either side of the channel, basically connecting. You could think of it as the channel being like, say you're like a river or something, or a road, and you have the starting point and the ending point. You have the place that connects them to, or that the channel connects the two. So on some of these channels, you only have half of it colored in, because you only have one number colored in. And on the other side, the channel isn't colored in and the number doesn't have a circle. So that basically means you have, like, it's called a hanging gate. So it just means that, you just have half of that. But that really comes into play in relationships, into connections you have with people, because if you meet someone who has the opposite one colored in, then that means you're going to have a strong connection, because you guys basically complete each other.
I got to pull up everyone's chart that I know.
Yes, because it's like you'll see it for friends, family, coworkers, bosses, you'll see, and sometimes you won't, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, no wonder they're so boring.
No, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, and it really shows you, those are like the really spicy, fun dynamics that you'll find. And then there's other ways that you connect with other people as well. But definitely when one person has one side and one has the other, if you guys happen to know each other, it's you guys, when you guys are together, you both get to experience what it's like to have that whole channel defined. And so when we talk about definition, like the color, the areas being colored in white, all that means is that those areas that you have colored in, it means you have consistent access to that energy. It means that no matter who you're around, what day it is, you have that energy in yourself, in your body.
I'm trying to look at mine. I'm like, do I have any?
Yeah, you have a ton.
Or I have here, yeah, in the middle.
You have 1,
In my
2, 3, because you have at least 3. I wrote down all your defined channels. I know you have at least 3. And so when you have it open or uncolored in, that means that you're open, you're going to be conditioned by your situations. So for example, who you're around. So let's say that, like, do you see that square down at the bottom
This
with
one?
the 5? Yeah. And you see the 5 right there?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't have that colored in, but actually, I think I actually do. Oh yeah, this yours. Sorry, I'm looking through all my notes here.
Oh, no worries.
Oh yeah, I actually do have that. So that is a good example. Okay, so you have the 15 and I have the 5. So what that means is that the different things that that 5 represents, when you and I are talking, you're being conditioned by my 5 energy because you don't have any 5 energy on your own. So because I do have the 5 energy, when we interact with each other, then you get to experience my 5 energy for yourself. And like vice versa, I don't have the 15. So I get to experience the 15 energy, which is across from the 5 there. I get to experience that when we're talking because I don't have it. So I'm being conditioned by your 15 that's defined, and you're conditioned by mine. Conditioning is not always negative in human design. We think of it as a negative thing, but it really isn't. All it means is that conditioning is really only negative if you believe it's who you are all the time, like who you are at your core. If you understand that it's just that sometimes you get to access that energy because you're around someone that brings that energy to you, then great, you can work with it. You can use it, like use that energy while you have it. But then don't be sad when you're at home by yourself and the energy is no longer there. That's where the problems arise, is when we start to doubt ourselves and demean ourselves and say, oh, we're horrible, we can't do anything, because we're too focused on the energy that's not ours and not focused on what we are. And so that's really like a big part of what I do and how I help people, is recognizing like, hey, you know, you're focusing on this thing that's not even you, whereas you have all these wonderful things to help you. Like this stuff is actually you. Sort of thing. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like too, conditioning, it's just like, I think like the word, I think like the word influencing or something could be better. Like we're influenced by each other, but we're not necessarily like, we don't have to shape and change ourselves based on other people. Like we could benefit from their energy, like you're saying, like you can create this type of energy together, but then when you're alone, like you don't have to continue to try to be that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, essentially, yes. Although I would say that I don't know that you can remove yourself from the influence when you're in
Mm.
that space. I don't think it's really a conscious choice. Like, so in
Yeah.
that sense, I think that's why conditioning is used, but I do like the idea of, I think we could use influence as a word too. I like that a lot. But I suppose the reason they use conditioning is because it's not something we can really control. It's like astrological transits. You're going to feel it, but how you choose to use it is up to you. So that's something key. It's like
Mm.
it's going to be there, but how you choose to interact with it is your choice. So that's
Mm.
definitely a thing. And that's the other thing that can condition us or influence us is transits. So even if you're completely by yourself, if a transit day, something's going on like with planets and such, you might have one of your open or undefined, uncolored in areas. You might actually have it colored in just because of the day it is. So that's something to keep in mind
Oh.
too.
Oh, okay. So it can, the chart changes, like how our birth chart won't change, but we can look at our chart through time. Is that?
Exactly, our transits. So depending on how, it's really like how it doesn't change anything about the chart, like the birth chart, the human design chart stays the same. It's really just how are the transiting planets impacting that chart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's something really important for people that do have a lot of uh, centers that are open, because a lot of times people do see that, and like in your situation you see you only have two centers colored in, and that might make you feel like, oh boy, like what am I working with here?
Okay.
But that's really not at all what it is. It's just to know how best to access the energy, and to recognize that if you feel like, you don't even have to look at your chart to get this, like you'll start to just recognize it, that when you're around certain people, you might feel a certain way, and it might really help you be like, stay more productive. And then when you're not around them, don't feel that level of production anymore. And so just make sure that you're not ever beating yourself up. I know from looking at your chart that you don't really struggle with that so much. You're actually probably really good at recognizing that you just don't have certain energy on times, and you're okay with that. Like you have that faith
Now
that,
I am.
yeah, but when you were
But
younger, it was
definitely when I was
hard.
younger, yeah. And just
Yeah.
feeling guilty, I think, and that I think probably comes from my projector self, but also
Mhm.
just childhood stuff of like, okay, when you're
Yeah.
not, and American society, but
Mhm.
like if you're not working, you're lazy or
Yeah.
whatever. So
Yeah.
I think as a kid, that would make me feel almost, I would get sick, like the burnout kind of stuff a lot, like
Hmm.
just trying to work too hard.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm always trying to work through, is not pushing myself too hard.
Hmm.
And it's,
Yeah,
I like
that's
to do stuff.
huge. Yeah. And
I have lots of ideas.
projectors really, that is a big risk, is the burnout. And I was on disability for 7 years, and went off of it and started working full time again a couple years ago, because I was like, I hate this. I hate being this young and being on disability. Like I felt like my life was over, even though I was doing other things. Just knowing that the government thought that I was sick enough that I needed that, it made me feel like I couldn't do hardly anything. But I was like, screw that. I'm going to work on just getting better. And I really did kind of do a lot of healing, and experienced a lot of physical healing. But I'm still a projector. That doesn't change,
Yeah.
Um, and uh, so I definitely can't do projectors, no 40-hour work weeks. We are definitely not designed for the 40-hour work week. And that was one of the things that really helped me heal a lot of that guilt of being told I was lazy, or why can't you just work like everyone else and do the same sorts of things as everyone else. And it was like, my dad thought I was being dramatic when I told him, if I have to work a 40-hour job, I am not going to be alive. Like I will leave. I can't do that. I just can't, and he thought, oh, you're being dramatic. I was like, no, I'm not being dramatic. I cannot do that. That's like, I
It's too
literally cannot
much.
exist. Way too much, way too much. And I think it's because people talk about empathy and like, um, shielding yourself, and I know that we can do that to a certain extent, but our very nature is to really just reach into everything. So almost anything, if we have to do it too much, is going to be way too much for a projector. So we really are designed to be able to go out into the world, to go out and interact, but also really have that downtime when needed, and have that flexibility
Yeah, the
to,
flexibility is like essential for me. Like when
yes.
I don't have that, I get anxiety.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, it's learning to not let the way that other people live their lives like dictate the way that I have to live
Mm.
mine.
Yes, and that's connected to you being a projector, but it's also connected to some of these channels that you have defined. So for example, and also your like your authority. So your authority is, is the self-projected authority. Is that something that you remember learning a little bit about when you had your other readings?
I
Because
don't
it's
think so.
okay. So you know how
I do
earlier,
remember like the talking about the investigating thing. And we
oh
did
yeah,
talk
that's your
about like
profile
my
type.
digestion, like
Yeah,
something to do with like how I eat
yeah.
and like how I best am productive and stuff like that.
So yeah, so you know how the strategy is to wait for invitation, then your authority is how you make those decisions of really knowing what is right for you. So it's like you're waiting for the invitation for different opportunities, whether that's energetic or someone actually inviting you to do something. Um, but how you decide what is right for you that's your authority. So the authority is how we actually decide, is this opportunity right for me? Because projectors are going to get tons of invitations one way or another, but we still have to determine, is it the right one for me? And that's where the authority comes in. That's what that's all about. And so for yours, it's self-projected. So what that means, it's actually really
That's
cool.
funny to me.
You're the first one I've met with this authority. It's really cool. I don't think it's terrible. It's actually, I had read that it wasn't very common because I was not very familiar with it. I was like, what? I've never even heard of this. Honestly, never even heard of it. 7 years of studying human design. And I was like,
That's interesting.
I've never met a self-projected projector. So what this means,
That's funny to me though. I feel like for me, just because I am very independent, which can be to a fault sometimes.
yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I have to listen to myself. Of course I do.
But that's kind of good because seriously, all of your channels here that are defined are literally talking about doing your own thing, and really a lot about like you might like study other things like other religions or spiritual practices, but it's not like you follow them 100%. You ultimately are really finding things from within you, and um and a lot of it's like from your experience. A lot of like these, like one of these channels here was talking about how you learn from your experiences and also the experiences of others, and you help others avoid the same mistakes. So for example, if you experience something and you became almost a expert on not doing that again, you can really help people not do that in the first place because you've already lived that. But not just what you've lived, what other people have. So you might enjoy like or you might just naturally remember things that happen, like history, or you might read history and be like, dude, we can't do this again. Like, learn from the past. You're going to be that person that's like, I remember that this didn't go down well when you guys did this. Like, we can't let that happen again. That's one of your
That makes a
natural
lot of
things.
sense to me.
Yeah. And so both, like, it could be things that happen to you personally, or that you've just witnessed and observed or learned about. And you really are a teacher and a leader. There's so much leader energy here, and leading by example. The only thing that I really saw that was something to be aware of is to, and I don't really, from what I know of you, I don't think this is so much an issue now. Maybe it was in the past, but as long as you don't get caught up thinking that you have the one true answer, like, don't become a cult leader.
Yeah.
As long as you don't do that.
Not in my not in this lifetime, but maybe in another past life.
Yeah, as long as you don't start thinking that you have like the one thing that will work for everyone, or that has to be like the only truth, then you're fine, because that's really the only major risk here, is that sort of thinking. And that's really if you're in your what's called the not self, and that's basically when you're operating from who you aren't rather than operating from who you are, So as long as you're really in your authenticity, then that's not so much a worry. But yeah, there's a lot of leading by example energy here. One of these channels is talking about how you inspire people. Inspiration is actually the name of the channel, and how just,
cool.
Yes,
That's beautiful.
things, and it's like, so it can be what you say, it can be like what you teach and what you speak about, but and a lot of times it is, but it's also very much about just how you are. There's a lot of stuff about how you are very tranquility was showing up a lot in a lot of these channels, so that no matter what life is throwing at you and what's going on, like, you have a very tranquil and calm energy. And so especially the people that see the craziness that goes on, because I think, like, on TikTok, for example, we don't necessarily know the drama that goes on in your life, but for the people that are aware of that, and they see the way you are in that drama, that's what's inspiring for people. They are seeing, like, wow, how is she doing this? And that may trigger people to ask you and, like, seek out your work, like, help you. They might be like, how do you do it? Teach me. So that can happen, but also just people knowing you and observing you in regular day-to-day life. Like, you help people by how you are living life, just who you are naturally. That was a big other thing I was talking about, is that you don't really have to do any specific thing in this life. It's just you being the way you are in your life that can be very profound. But you do have also a lot of energy here about actually being a very powerful leader. There was something I wanted to look here. Oh yeah, spontaneous insights. Where was it? I put a few different notes that I wanted to make sure I didn't forget. Where is that one? That's that. Oh yeah, here we go. So tranquil. Okay, so that 1020 channel, that's the one dealing with being very tranquil and leading by example and being very inspiring.
This one right here.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of that also, so this is where, like, the centers come into play. The center here is the yellow one down below. That's your identity. So one big thing is that this is something you're really lucky about, is that you have a defined identity center. So that means that you have the ability to actually know who you are, because your identity and who you are at its core is defined, it is structured, it is unchangeable. It will not change. It cannot change.
That's very true.
You might think it has changed. There may have been times where you didn't even know who you were because you may have had a lot of you were very influenced by the open stuff. You had people around you or situations where you might have forgotten who you are. But who you are cannot change. You are not changeable. Someone that has an open one like myself actually is changeable. And then we have our own drama with that, me, like, who am I? And that is very changeable. So I think, I'm glad I have what I have, but I think people with a defined center, identity center, it's easier for some things for you because when you're connected to that, there's no doubt in your mind. You know exactly who you are, what you stand for, what's important to you. There's no wavering. And look at how many of those circles you have defined.
Yeah,
literally all except for one.
That's so interesting. That makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense to me.
So all that stuff you were saying about like always having to do it your own way and all of that, that's coming to this, because your way is your way. Nobody else. There might be similarities, but it's your way, and that's how it has to be. Like, that's how it should be. But you do have elements in here where you can work with other people for sure.
Yeah, and I love to collaborate and on, the podcast and other things. Like, I love to be able to like share ideas with people, and then in my private sessions. But I very much, I think in my day-to-day life, I must do things a certain way, even if it takes me, if it's more complicated than it needs to be, I'll still do it that way, just because that's the way that I like it to be done.
Yeah. Well, and that's how it should be, because some of the things here, we're talking about how sometimes, you might, like, you may even have people around you that try to tell you, like, oh, that's stupid. Why are you wasting so much time doing that? They may say whatever, but it's really important for you to just hold on to that understanding of knowing that, like, whatever, they don't understand, and that's okay. They don't understand why you do what you do, but as long as you know that that's okay, and that you need to just go with what you feel is the way you need to do things, then you shouldn't, hopefully you won't be too bothered by what anyone says, because really it comes down to not understanding. I think a lot of times that's why my youngest daughter lives with me still, and she has certain ways of doing things that are drastically different than the way I do things. And sometimes, you may not understand why, but you just got to be like, okay, obviously there must be a reason why you want to do it that way. So, okay.
Yeah. I think that's a lesson for me, is to let people do it their way instead of having to want to control everyone. I think that's a healing for me, because I'm like, oh, that's what you're talking about too before, like, this is the best way to do it.
Yes.
And so letting people make their own decisions, that's something I continuously try to work on, because and I don't really have a problem with that, like with my clients or anything, but more just in my family, like interpersonal relationships. It's harder to let go sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And especially as a projector, it's really hard, because a lot of times we see things that other people are unaware of. Like, we see people's blind spots and things they may not even be aware of. But unless a person asks, it's like that unsolicited advice. And we are very prone to giving it until we really heal and recognize, like, okay, that's not working. Because, oh boy, projectors will get like the worst backlash, I think, more than anyone, when we give unsolicited advice. Maybe because it's so true. It's like we are speaking the truth, but it is definitely a truth they don't want to hear.
That makes so much sense.
So, but I was just going to say, with the one thing to keep in mind that may help you on accepting other people's ways of being is that just like you have a very specific identity and way of interacting with the world, they too probably have a very specific one. And you wouldn't want someone to ever say yours was the wrong way. So
No.
even though yours may be vastly different than theirs, they still have one that's right for them.
Yeah, I have to remember that. Well, I'm just gonna ask a couple more quick questions about the chart and then we'll
Sure.
kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
So one thing as we're looking at this, I'm curious about how if we're seeing there is a black and a red line in
Yeah.
the centers.
Good question.
What exactly does that, what does that mean?
Yeah.
With the black and the red,
Yeah,
or if
sure.
that's important at all.
Oh, it is. Definitely. Definitely. So if you look here on the right-hand side of the chart where it says personality and you see all those numbers in black,
Oh,
and
yes.
then, yeah, and then you see design on the left, all in red. So the personality is based on the black, is based on your actual birth time. So that's more like your astrology chart. It's based on your actual time of birth. And this is going to be the elements of yourself that you're consciously aware of. So it's things like, so when you see like a channel there that's in black, you're gonna, those sorts of elements, like that gate is going, remember the gate is the numbers, those things are going to, that energy of that gate is going to be, you're going to be aware of it. You're going to read about it and you're going to be like, oh yes, I'm definitely like that. Whereas the ones that are in red are more so dealing with your design, which is oftentimes called your subconscious or your unconscious self. But what it really is the consciousness of your body. So for people that are really tuned into their body, they may actually be aware of some of this. I've been aware of some of it, but I have a lot of earth energy and I do a lot of very tuned into the body. but yeah, that's based on your bodies. That's almost like your body's kind of like your body's birth chart in a sense, but it's actually based on where the sun was 88 days before you were born. So that's using a whole different time and date, or different date, I should say. So yeah, so the red, a lot of times people will think of that as unconscious elements. So a lot of times, like say, like for example, you have the 13 gate in red. So that aspect you don't really necessarily perceive as being a part of who you are, because it's a part of who your body is, but it's not really a part of who your more outward personality, like who you're aware of. You know, when you think of who Grace is, that's probably not something you think of as part of who Grace is, but it actually is part of who you are. And it's actually a very natural part. A lot of times the parts of ourselves that are our body kind of just kind of do their thing no matter what, because because we're not aware of them. It's just like almost like a instinct or a physical characteristic that we just are that way. Whereas our personality, I think because we're aware of it, it's sometimes a little easier for us to try to twist it, and you know, we self-talk, negative self-talk and stuff, you know, like, oh, maybe I'm not really like that, or not so much. Yeah. So I think of the body, the red stuff, as being a lot more consistent in some ways, but really they all are, you know. That's just my personal observation. But yeah, that's what that is.
Wow, cool. That's
Oh,
so
and
interesting.
yeah. Oh, yeah, it is. One other thing I just wanted to mention about that is when you see the red and the black together in a channel, that means that you have it both in your personality and in your body's design. So that
like
means
this one, like the 15,
yes,
I have both.
Exactly. So you would have that, you're aware of it, and also your body has it. One thing I've noticed about human design is sometimes some practitioners tend to favor the red ones more than the black ones, but I think that's kind of strange. I don't know. Like but I think they're both equally important. But it is nice because the thing with the red design ones, the body's design, is because we're not aware of it. I mean, it's there, but it's like if you're not aware of it, you can't always, it feels sometimes like you can't make the best of it or the most of it. So I really like when I see the red and the black, because you naturally have that energy and you're also aware that you have that energy. So you can
so I have
really
a
like
couple of those.
use it. Yes, you have a lot of them.
Oh, interesting.
So that's really super good, I think. Yeah.
Now I'm thinking, just like thinking, but I'm just thinking about like how if this red part is influenced by our like subconscious, like our, us in, pre-birth, what is that called? Gestation? I forget.
Yeah.
When we're in the womb, like I wonder if, the energy of our mother, if that affects the development of this body at all, and like ancestral connections and things like that.
Yeah, that would be really, that's
a thing to think about.
For sure. I saw a video the other day talking about how when our grandmothers, our maternal grandmothers, were carrying our mothers, that a part of us was present because of the follicles. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes back scientifically. I think they said 12 generations. There'll be like an aspect of that follicle in the whatever.
Wow.
Oops.
That's so interesting. That's so fascinating.
They used to say 7 and now they say 12. But I don't know like the actual, I don't know who put that study out there, but it makes sense to me, like, and then just thinking about all of our societal stuff, how that's influenced by that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. And one thing is like, if you study some more, and I mean, you can always reach out to me, of course, and ask me any questions you have. I love helping people, especially if they have a specific question about something. But and also for the people listening, when you find out what your different channels are that are defined, that's a really good place to start, because it's going to show you what those natural innate abilities are. Those are like your little, like, kind of like your secret weapon, it's like these aspects, and some people have none defined and some people have many. And, so the ones that are colored in, that are defined, they're really going to be like that energy that you can basically pull out of your pocket and utilize no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. So they're really a very big part of who you are. And even for the ones that are empty, that's like your chameleon energy. That's where you can really be very changeable depending on different situations and people, which definitely can be very beneficial to be able to relate to people and situations and adapt, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's perfect, because that's kind of what I was going to ask you, like for people who are just pulling up their chart, like what is a good place to start? So kind of starting with some of your channels, exploring that, and then maybe seeing how like the centers and stuff, how they each of them are open or not open, and then maybe diving into more in depth with the numbers and stuff, because I feel like the numbers is a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So we didn't get into, but we'll get into
that's a lot
another time.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say number one, first step is, if you're going, it doesn't matter where you're getting your free chart, there's going to be somewhere on there where it's going to tell you what your type is and your profile, and with that information, it's usually going to show you what your authority is and your strategies. So for example, if you find out you're a projector, you can look up and see, what is a strategy for projectors, and then you can read about that. So you're going to learn about waiting for the invitation. And then you're going to want to look up your authority. So for example, here on Grace's, it says self-projected projector under type. And so that self-projected part, that is her authority. She's self-projected. That is the
What
authority.
is yours?
Emotional. Yeah. So for me, I have to wait through these different valleys of emotions where if I hear about something and I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. I really need, if it's a big decision, I need to wait, because then a little bit later, usually a few days later or whatever, I might be like, I'm not really so sure about that. I might feel really negative about the opportunity. And so I need to go through that high and low to get to more of a neutral place where I'm like, feeling both, all of the different emotions, so that I can say, like, how do I really feel overall? That's emotional authority. So
Awesome.
yeah. So I would say definitely check out what the strategy is first for your type. And that's really easy to find out from Google once you know what your type is, like whether you're a projector, manifestor, etc. And then finding out what your authority is. And once you find out those two things, you can really start utilizing the strategy and authority, applying it to your everyday life, and see, like we call it experimenting with human design. You want to start implementing those sorts of ways of interacting with life and see, like, experiment like a scientist. How does this impact my life? Am I noticing changes? What am I feeling? And just explore it and experiment with it, play with it, basically. Yeah. And then after that, once you really feel like you're getting the hang of that, then start exploring the different centers and what's defined, what's colored in, and all of that. And that you can really find easily. You can find a lot of info online by, just look at the numbers that are on either side of that channel. And then you can do a search for really easy. You can do like 13 and then 33, and then just type in human design or human design channel, and you will find lots of free information where you can learn about what it means to have that channel colored in.
Cool. Yeah, there's just there's so many blogs, like there's so many things out there. So
there's a lot.
have fun exploring. But I think that's really great. One, and two, thank you for sharing a little bit about my chart, because that was very helpful for me. So
cool. Yeah. Welcome.
But yeah, if people are interested in connecting with you, we'll share all your info in the show notes so people can find you on TikTok. Nice. And then if people want to get like a reading, what should they email you? What's the best way to connect?
Well, I'm in the process of revamping my website, Opal Insights, or opaliconsulting.com.
And I'll check with you before I put this out, because depending on when it comes out, maybe it'll be ready. But if not,
there we go. That's
people
good
can
motivation.
Find it. People can find you on TikTok, and then when it comes up, they can see the site. Yes,
that's a very good idea, because I was gonna fix this one thing beforehand. But yeah, TikTok, if people follow me on TikTok, they can always, if we're mutuals, then definitely they can message me. But I'm also on Instagram. I'm just not as active on Instagram, but it's the same username on Instagram. So they can send me a message directly on there too.
Yeah, and if you guys have specific, I know you posted about this on TikTok. Like if people have specific human design questions, you should go to whatever that post was, or any post, and comment them, so that way you can share like more specific things. If people have, I have a 1324, and you could give them a little info. But of course, if people want to go more in depth, they can pay you and get full reading. And we encourage that. So I'll put all your info in there. Anything else you want to share with us before we close out?
Well, just to add to what you were saying, like I really love helping people learn about things. And so definitely I also love income. But when people post on my TikTok and ask about certain things, even if it's not super specific, even if they just want to know more about their type, like I want to know more about manifestors, or more about this emotional authority or that authority, it helps everyone, because when you post a question asking something, there's always going to be other people that have that same question, and it's going to really benefit them too. So please always, feel free, if you're hearing this or watching, to really reach out, because we really do want to talk about these things and help you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's helpful too, like as a whatever consumer of content, to be able to see like, okay, this is the question I also have. And maybe I didn't realize I had that question, but the video answered the question I was asking.
Yeah,
So you never know.
for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
so
this has
nice to
been
talk
fun.
to you.
Yeah. Likewise.
And I
Yeah.
appreciate all the information.
Yeah, sure. And feel free, if you want to do another podcast at some point, I'd be happy to. And we
There's
can
there's so
dive
much
in
more
deeper.
in depth. So yeah, I would love that. Well,
Cool.
thank you very much. I'm gonna I'll share everything in the show notes so people can find you, connect with you. And if people want to dive more into human design and they have specific questions for the podcast,
Yeah.
send your questions my way. And if I get some, I love to do like Q&A episodes. So if I get some questions and stuff, that would be a fun thing for us to do, to kind of go into what people are curious about, because I think this was really helpful, like kind of like basic, like, okay, what am I even looking at? And then from there, I think it will help people like kind of shake out those questions, like, oh, okay, like now I know what this is, but what is this other thing?
Yeah. And I would say the other thing, just to add, is that maybe someone's interested, but they don't know where to start, as far as like, what should I even ask about? You can always ask about a topic of your life. So if you're wondering about like job opportunities, or what might be a good work environment for you, or how should, if there's some area that you're struggling with, a lot of times understanding some element of your human design chart can definitely help make it, less difficult, or, help you work on something or understand something in your life.
Yeah, because just like with astrology, it's like we can look at the basic chart to understand our personality, like our behaviors, that kind of stuff. But then we can also use it in tandem with our life. So I think that's a good reminder for people that it's not just about kind of like analyzing ourselves, like we can apply it to other things.
Yes. Because I definitely want to bring it down to like the world level of, it's cool to understand these things on like a spiritual level, but definitely want to help actual lives get better,
Yeah.
for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. This is
And
fun.
we
Thank
will
you.
see y'all in the next episode. Bye.